infrastructure testing, right? Security testing and infrastructure testing out there. So previously we spoke about what is cybersecurity and what is an attack, cyber attack, and we also saw what do you mean by providing a security, right? We talk about confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and we also talk about authorization and authentication also out there, right? When any of this is broken, we call cybersecurity attack is occurred successfully out there. Let's say my question is, let's say you're doing some kind of a security provision you're doing. You have a Linux server and there's a web application running on it. And your team is going to tell you that, right? Karthik, we have given all the security required for that. And the web application is also secure and it is not breakable, right? It is completely safe, it is going to tell. But how do you know whether that is true or not? Because end of the day, people who are securing this, who are configuring these servers and other things are human beings. Human beings always make errors out there. And even a small tiny hole that is more than sufficient to compromise an entire network, right? There are places where infrastructure, everything has been secured, but they did not secure the printers, and the hackers got into company network via, Wi-Fi printers, because they were able to hack the printer from in parking space, and they got inside the network, and everything was compromised, right? Entire data was taken out of the network via that printer. So even a small component is going to be taken out there. That is going to be. But how do you know which is secure, which is not secure? What is the way of knowing it? Right? So for this process is where infrastructure security testing and infrastructure security comes into play. So here what we are doing is that we are going to emulate or do exactly same actions that are done by an hacker, but here we are doing it in a controlled environment, in a controlled way possible. So here in a hacker, typically what is going to happen is that they start looking at for ports and a lot of other actions that are going to be done out there. Same actions are going to be done. But in our case, we are going to record those sessions. We know what is happening. The client is informed about what actions are going to be done on them, and they'll be recorded, and any vulnerabilities that is identified will be reported to them. That is what basically an infrastructure testing is going to be basically about, right? So here we have to understand what is an infrastructure, what is a web application, and what are the different types of vulnerabilities that could occur. All those things we are going to look into that. And we also will look at what are the different phases of an attack, right? How do you go about do that? It is a lot of people will have a very, in the movies you might have seen or in TV series, very few TV series predict what exactly happens out there, right? Even if it is then in a proper way, it is quite difficult to understand unless you start doing the security testing, right? So previously we spoke about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay. So basically only allowing a particular person or an authorized person to view your data is confidentiality. Only they can view, no one else can view. If an unauthorized user is able to see your data, it is a breach of confidentiality, right? So integrity is basically able to modify the data. Someone is able to delete, add data, change the state of the data. So that is basically about integrity is about that, right? So availability is that making sure that all the legitimate users are able to access the devices or resources without any kind of an issue, right? For instance, let's say you have an office account and there is a password protected out there, and if you enter wrong password 3 times in a row, your account is going to be locked, right? So now what if someone know about this kind of a security feature? They know your username and they enter wrong password 3 times for your email ID. Now we are automatically logged out. You can't do the work entire day waiting for someone to unlock your account out there, right? So you might have to put a mail to your manager. You'll put a mail to the admin and they have to reset it, and they can do the same thing again and again. You reset it, then they'll re-enter the wrong password 3 times. Your account is locked again, and this goes, right? So what is availability, right? Also, it could be a lot of other things, right? So saturating the server with so many requests that it is not able to work. it crashes. That is also one way of removing availability out there. And this is what confidentiality, integrity, availability basically means, right? And the end goal of any attack is that to breach one of this or all three of them, right? Even one of them is broken, it is a security apparatus is compromised. That is what the main thing about it. So there are few other things that are also comes into play: authentication, authorization, and accounting out here. Okay, if you see our previous video, you'll be able to see about CIA and authentication, authorization much more deeper out there, right? Authentication is a process of authenticating yourself. If someone is able to compromise your username and password, your biometrics, or your access token, that is the broken authentication, meaning they are able to prove them, right? Authentication is you proving yourself what you are, who you are to the system, right? So if you're able to prove that process. Authorization is you're already in the system, but you're accessing some resources which you're not supposed to. For instance, a normal employee is not supposed to access the data what manager can have access to, right? So let's say a normal employee should not know the unless until they have the permission to view other employees details of there, right? What salary they're getting, what is the breakup they're getting, what is their mass card, what is their Aadhaar card number, which is all stored in the company network. That should not be disclosed to anyone apart from the authorized people of there, right? So in you not being able to see is that you're not been authorized to view certain information. Sometimes there even the managers are not supposed to look at certain information, right? So that is basically authorization. Not you are part of the organization, you are authenticated into that, but you don't have permission to view certain files and resources out there. That is basically authorization is. So accounting is something I think probably we did not speak in the previous class and which we speak here. Accounting is the process of monitoring and logging the activities of the network systems. Okay. So especially, someone was talking about SOC. In a server environment, right? In a Linux, what we use is that whenever we want to run any system services commands, right? I want to start my web server, I want to stop my web server, I want to make some modification, I want to create a user. Those are all done using a privilege commands, whether you have to be a root user. Root user in Linux is an administrator user, or there is also something called as a sudo user, meaning he is also root user is a built-in administrator that comes with any Linux operating system, whereas a sudo user is a normal user who is being elevated to do administrative actions, right? So accounting is the process of monitoring. So whenever there's someone is running a root level or an administrative commands, we need to be able to monitor that, right? Especially in a SOC environment. If you restart a server, if you restart a service means I'm restarting my Apache web server or anything, or I'm running any root level or administrative commands out there, a alert has to be generated and it is sent to be the centralized system out there, and they will verify why that particular command was run out there, right? Any kind of such activities has to be taken into consideration. And you may think, right, you might restart your system again and again and again and again. In real time, that does not occur, right? The servers are, I know there are a lot of servers out there who have been not restarted their servers for 2 years, 3 years. It has been running continuously out there, right? So all those things plays in everything. Accounting is also in some cases in application perspective. In one of the situations, what happened was in one of my companies previously when I worked, they were using SAP software, right? One time what happened was in the morning there was an urgent meeting. They told there is 10,000 client information, the name and address of 10,000 clients for a very large company was deleted. It's no longer available out there. And they asked what happened and we told no, right? Nothing, it was not done by us and this and everything out there. And luckily they were able to, it was identified well in advance. They were able to recover that mail from the backups, that information available out there. One more thing is they were able to identify who deleted it. The reason is when the delete command was sent, it also added the user ID or the user email ID for for that user who deleted press that person, right? That person had accidentally deleted it, but he was afraid of some kind of an action, so he did not tell. He thought he will get away with it, but he did not, because there was a log told that this particular user sent the delete command, and this was the command that was sent out, right? So luckily it was able to recover that information, and he was subjected to disciplinary actions out there. Okay. So that is how the accounting is going to be. You are accountable for your actions, right? That is one thing. When you tell certain things, you have to tell that. You cannot tell I did not do that action. You are going to be held accountable for that. So that is going to be the part. So the main thing we are going to look at today is security testing, right? Is a type of software testing focused on identifying and addressing security vulnerability in software applications. Security testing can be mainly divided into two parts. One is vulnerability analysis and penetration testing, right? The first one is vulnerability analysis. Predominantly, predominantly what happens in a vulnerability analysis is that there is some kind of a security assessment that is going to be done. What happens in this situation is every application will leak certain kind of an information, what we call it as a binary information. There's also something called as port numbers, right? So as someone pointed out, these are all related to networking terms out there, right? So predominantly what is going to happen is that these tools, security attachment tools, they're all automated or it can be manual. If you use Nmap as a service, that is going to be manual out there, right? It will check for vulnerabilities, it is look for ports, and it is a way of knowing what vulnerabilities that are there, right? Whether you have configured your services, whether you configured your server properly, is it leaking out any information or not? That is what happens identified in a vulnerability assessment out here, right? The thing we have to note here is vulnerabilities are only identified but not exploited, usually done with some help of automated scanning tools. Meaning, let's say there is a vulnerability, right? There is something called as smiley attack. Example I'm giving is an FTP attack, file transfer protocol. FTP is a protocol that is used for transferring files from one server to another server, and predominantly before Git was used more, people used to transfer code from their desktop to the server via FTP itself, right? So there was a smiley attack on that particular one version. The hackers had got created a backdoor in a particular FTP version. So if you put in the username part a smiley at the end, it will bypass all, that no password is required. We will have root access to the entire database. Okay. So what is the difference between a scan and the exploit is, if I can scan what is the version of that FTP, and based on that particular version number, I can tell this is a vulnerability that is present out there. Please update. I'm not logging inside. I'm not using that exploit or anything. That is vulnerability assessment. Whereas in pen testing, we'll actually open it and show. See, we are able to compromise your file transfer protocol. We are inside. We can see these are the files. That happens in a penetration testing. In vulnerability assessment, it is very straightforward. It is basically, there'll be one tool. I'm going to put IP address in that tool and click on the scan button. I'll get a report for that. That is how usually it occurs out there. So predominant number of tools that we see is, in the main course, we also see how to use Nmap is a very important concept. There is also Nessus and Quali scanners are there, right? Nmap is a command line tool, very powerful. It's free, right? It will help you identify a lot of vulnerabilities. But at an industrial level, when you want a very high accurate, scanning tool, Nessus and Qualys plays a very important role. They're very good, and they are good with network infrastructure. Meaning, they will look at hardware devices like your servers, your Linux operating system, look for software versions, all those things that can be identified out there. But what they can't do is web application related vulnerabilities, right? We talk about WAVAS top 10, SQL injection attacks, XSS attacks, file injection attack, all those things that is going to be taken care from a web application scanner technology tools. you know so from a networking perspective, if you see, we can tell network scanners usually work on a layer 4 predominantly, and certain cases layer 7 as well, but they don't do deep packet inspection, right? They don't go at the data level and see what is there. Whereas an application scanners are going to be much more deeper component into that. They look at the data, they look at what is any payload in the data, and sometimes even identify virus and things and all in the data that's going to be taken care by application scanning tools, right? So there are three primary objects of vulnerability assessment. Identify vulnerabilities ranging from critical design flaws to simple misconfiguration. Okay, so it will check any design flaws that where you have configured the network. Is there any issue with that part? And it will check, okay, this is what is happening out there, right? And certain times simple misconfiguration is like we are having SSH. In SSH, we will see that root is enabled or password less approach is enabled out there, meaning no password is required, or they are going to allow for a weaker password setting up out there, right? When you create users, telling that there should be certain password complexity, right? It should be 8 character long, it should be having uppercase letter, lowercase, numbers, special characters. That is going to be misconfiguration if that is not set. If you're having a 4 character password, then it is going to be misconfiguration, right? With the current computational things and everything, if you take OTP, which is in higher multi-factor authentication, it should actually increase the one security. But if you're having an OTP is only 3 digit, 1, 2, and 3 digits, then it can be taken as a security means configuration, because 3 digits is not going to provide much ample amount of security, right? So probably 4 or 6 is much more ideal out there. Document vulnerabilities so the developer can easily identify, report, reproduce the finding, right? So any work, especially in ethical hacking, the main difficult task, which according to me, right, for me, where it is labor intensive or something which is very difficult to do, is documentation. Basically, here we're telling, after once we have hacked it, we're telling how we went into the process, what are the steps we followed to hack. Right? It is hacking is not as simple as what it's seen on the TV shows or movies are. It is a much more. It is not complex. It is a bit different, right? The way it feels when you compromise is different out there. So all those things has to be documented so that the developers or operations team are able to fix that vulnerability, and so that no one can get in via that particular vulnerability into the system, right? Uh, Create guidance to assist developer with remediations and identify vulnerabilities. At the same time, after documenting it, you are also providing remediations to the developers or the pertaining system administrators, and how to fix those vulnerabilities, right? What action has to be taken and things like that. Let's say if it's an SSH misconfiguration, we have to tell them which configuration file they have to access it, and what file, what parameter has to be changed to make it a secure configuration, right? So those things also we have to take into consideration when we're doing the documentation and VA objective of it. So what are the different stages of a VA, right? Just a second, guys. So I'm talking about vulnerability analysis stages. What are the things that you're going to do out there? Predominantly, what is going to happen is, first and foremost is network discovery, right? So we have to identify, let's say you take your Wi-Fi, home Wi-Fi network, right? You're having a home Wi-Fi network. Our main process, similarly, a company will also will have its own network. Just like in your home network, there are multiple devices, your phone, tablets, TV, and in some cases, washing machine is all connected to your Wi-Fi network. right? Network discovery basically deals about which devices that are there in a network. There's something called as a network scanning techniques. So when we talk about nmap and other things that will come into play here, it will check how many devices are there, right? So a network range will be there. We have to check what network devices are there. Once you identify, let's say there are about 10 devices, you may know in a 10 devices there may be one server and there is 9 different desktops in a network. And let's assume for that. Your target has to be your server and not desktops. So how do you know which device is a server and which device is a desktop out there when you do that part? So that is where we do network port scanning and service identification. For instance, if a device is running port 443, it means that particular device is running web server, right? So no other device, only web servers will run 443, nothing else will do. So now I know out of this 10 device, this is a server which is of more important. What I'm going to do, I'm going to do vulnerability scanning and detection out here. Okay, and vulnerability scanning and detection out here, I will identify what are the possible vulnerabilities that are there. Okay, so once this is done, we are going to give a resolution for that. If you remember, I told one smiley attack in a FTP account, FTP software. The remediations are not complex, they're usually very simple. For that FTP remediation, how do we overcome that vulnerability? Is just that update their FTP server to the latest one. That is what is required, right? Once there, that is going to be resolved after that part. And then again, once you find the result, meaning once you know what has to be done, integrate it to the system, meaning making necessary modifications to the infrastructure devices out there to make this go away, right? And the continuous securely, meaning it you have to keep on doing it. It is not that okay, I scanned today, I fixed 10 vulnerabilities and I'm not going to touch that vulnerability again. No. VA stages or VA scans has to be done very frequently. If you are doing it from an external entity, probably once in a year, but internal scans has to be occur once in every month, right? Because software packages are identified regularly, new software vulnerabilities are identified, and we have to be regularly updates those things as well, right? A lot of times so what happens is that when we scan networks, we find a bunch of vulnerabilities in the network. They tell, okay, we scanned 6 months back and we fixed all the vulnerabilities at that time, no patches were added to that part. But why is that we are getting more vulnerabilities now, right? The point is that the softwares that were installed, new vulnerabilities were identified in the last 6 months. So it is a security is not in one stop or a one stage process. It is a continuous process. In a simple way, what I'll tell people is that, security implementation is like shaving your beard. You shave and shave, it will keep on coming back and you have to keep on repeating the process. It is a never ending process out there. That's why it's called continuously secure. You have to keep on scanning, you have to keep on updating, you have to keep on doing the process out there. That is how VA stages work out there, right? So this is predominantly a scan report, what we are seeing out here. Just basically, I'm not, probably we're not doing anything out here. We are opening a scanner and putting the IP addresses. So in this case, you can see the host that are there is 54, meaning I have taken up 54 devices IP addresses. I'm scanning them. Totally, I've identified 1,564 vulnerabilities that are there, right? Remediations is 391 because mainly because a single software may have multiple vulnerabilities, like 4 to 5 vulnerabilities. I can fix all those vulnerabilities just by updating to the latest. So remediation is only single update to the latest version. So that is there. And even in vulnerabilities, there are different stages. There are critical, high, medium, low, and info. Basically, it talks about criticals ones are which can have a complete compromising the data in your servers, and high is also similar to that, but it'll have a little bit less impact, right? So whereas the medium and low predominantly are situations where there is no data is compromised, but it could aid in a long term, right? It could get promoted to an higher vulnerability, right? Maybe it can become a critical or high at somewhere later stage, right? So usually what happens is that if you are having a critical bug, you're supposed to fix it in 48 hours. If you have an high bug with high status, you got about 30 days. For medium, you got 60 days to fix that bug, and low is got about 90, right? Info is basically it was talking about the versions that are there, right? So security best practices, so that is not going to make much of an impact out there. So it is a good thing to fix them, but it is not mandatory. But whereas other four, it is important to fix them out there, right? So any questions related to vulnerability analysis, guys, before we move forward? So someone is asking, are we going to discuss networking in this or upcoming lectures? Very little, not much. I think if we deal something related to firewall, we might talk a little bit about it, but not much. In the main course, we also talk about it, but not in the internship, right? That's the limitation of timing is there for us to cover everything. VA is vulnerability analysis is something which we are looking for entry level, job roles that are there, because mainly here they'll have this option, they'll get IP address or the domain names, you have to put it on and run a scan out there. And if everything is working fine, they'll create a report and things. For the first couple of months, they're going to run the scans, right? So for them to understand, only then they'll start looking at penetration testing. So penetration testing is the second component. So as it says, is an authorized simulated attack on a computer system to evaluate security. Use same tools and technique process as attackers to find and demonstrate the business impact of weakness in the system, right? As I told, in a VA, right, we are running a usually some kind of a scanning tool. It will run some preliminary test and it will identify vulnerabilities of that. We are not going to exploit. Whereas in a penetration testing, we are actually doing an attack, right? What would be an actual attack vector done by a hacker will also be done by the same way. The entire process is not going to change. It is going to be very much similar. Only thing here is that the errors are going to be reported and any damage to the property is not going to happen out there, right? That is going to be taken care of by that, making sure no damage. So for instance, if you're able to compromise any file transfer protocol, or if you're able to access any unauthorized file, we don't go inside and look what information is out there, right? And we immediately inform the current right set of people what exactly is going to be there, right? So in types of penetration testing can be taken into three box types: white box testing, gray box testing, and black box testing, right? So what do you think, roughly, I'm just asking out of curiosity, what do you think is the difference? White box testing, gray box testing, and black box testing, right? So let's assume, let me open an Excel, right? So what are the components, right? What are the components that make up a web application predominantly? The first one is server is going to be the server. Basically in server, what is going to be there? OS will be there. In most cases, it is going to be Linux, Ubuntu, or in our case, let's assume Linux, Ubuntu. Usually in enterprise level, they use Red Hat or Windows, and also that's going to be there, right? And let's assume this is a PHP software, a simple static web application. They're going to use PHP for developing server side. They're going to use HTML code, that is your front end. They will use MySQL for running your database, right? Inside the database, there's going to be database design or what we call as a schema out there that's going to be there. And the data is also going to be present out there. Okay. Then again, user authentication is also there. Meaning here basically we're talking about username and passwords that are there. The code is actually going to be present out there, right? Some kind of a code that is present out there. These are the different components that make up a simple application. I'm not telling there's a lot more to this part. There's a server, front end, back end, and a lot of other things that comes into play, right? So now your Linux server is having a username and password, right? Someone has to access that thing that is there. And again, let's say your Linux is also having SSH, right? There is a username and password for this. So basically what happens is black box is basically talking about you have a least amount of information to hack a web application. The least amount of information that here is going to be the domain name. For example, I could have www.example.com. So the hacker will never know what kind of an operating system when he starts hacking or start doing the scanning for that. He will not know what is the operating system, what software they are running, what is the username and password given out there. That is not going to be have access to that part, right? And this is what usually an hacker who is trying to hack into your system is going to be faced with. So he has to do a lot of other actions before he could start hacking. He likes to know what kind of an operating system is there, what kind of a programming language they're using, what database they're using, what kind of an authentication, can I have access to their code, can I compromise their SSH server, all those things he has to think, and everything has to be done by him manually. Okay, everything has to be done by him manually out there. So that is black box, right? So what happens in a white box is this is a white box is usually done by an internal pen tester, meaning the company usually will have someone part of the team who will hack the application and check for any vulnerabilities. That person who is part of the development team will have access to the operating system, will know what PHP version they're running, what kind of an HTML, CSS, or JavaScript or React they're running, that he will know. He will have access to the MySQL database. He'll have username and passwords for everything that is going to be there. He'll have access to the code and even have access to the SSH. Every component that makes up that particular server, that is being have access to the white box testing method. Okay, so that is basically usually an internal pen tester who has have access to that. So here, in order to reduce time and look at best security practices, they would give a white box testing. So I can do a lot more advanced kind of a testing out there, right, in white box testing. The middle one is going to be black box testing. Sorry, gray box testing. So meaning in black box testing, we don't have any data. In white box testing, we have complete data. Gray box testing is something given to an external security auditor. Like I am a external security auditor. I go test an application for a couple of days and then I'm moving on to some other company and some other thing. So my job predominantly working one website in every week. So I compromise and see what is the vulnerability, then move on from that. So that is what is happening there. For them, for us, we are going to have a gray box system. So meaning here, I will have access, I will know the version information, what versions they're running, but not code. I will not have access to the code, right? I will not access to the Linux server. I will not have access to that part. Okay, right? That is going to be there. And again, I will not have access to the MySQL database also, right? But I will have access to the database data because I'm compromising some information out there. I will have access to the application username, right? Even a website username and password is going to be there. That is going to be given out there to me. At the same time, a developer is going to sit with me and explain how the website works for me, right? So gray box testing is somewhere you're getting the data, but you're not getting complete information about that, right? We rarely work with the code, security static analysis. We rarely work on the static analysis. We predominantly going to work on the components of them. Okay, so that is going to be what a gray box testing basically is about. We are getting a lot of information, not complete information, because every information I receive about the application, it is going to help me in a vulnerability identifying. Okay, it will help me in breaking that application, all those things. If I know, let's say that port number 22 is running, I know SSH is running, so I will, that information I can now, I can try to compromise the SSH server of the. If I can compromise SSH server, I will have complete access to the system, and so on and so forth. That is how it will go, right? So that is where three types of testing comes into play. In black box, you don't have any information. White box, you have all the information. Gray box, you are having, it's partial information. It is not on the lower end. We get a lot of information, but not complete information, right? So that is what happens in a penetration testing. So how does hacking take place, right? Predominantly, these are the five stages: reconnaissance, scanning, gaining access, maintaining access, clearing track. And this is phases for an external attacker with a malicious intent. Right. So for us, predominantly, we directly, reconnaissance basically talks about collecting information about the target without directly interacting with the target. Like, you know, let's say there's a company XYZ. I want to know what kind of servers are running. Are they running a Linux servers or a Windows server? Are they running Ubuntu or Red Hat Linux? How do I know about that? Without connecting to their network, how can I know about that? It can be done in multiple ways. You can go to their website, look at the career page. If there's any system administrator, then you can look at the job description. It will tell, okay, they are looking for a server engineer who is working on Linux servers, who has experience working on Ubuntu. So I'm getting information that there are running web servers using Ubuntu Linux operating system, right? Something like that. Not only that, we can get a lot of information about the company using LinkedIn as well, right? Those are the different. Though remember this, you're not directly sending any attacks to the company to collect information. That is what is called reconnaissance. And for an external pen tester like me or a contractor, security, auditor, reconnaissance is not going to be important for us, right? I'm not going to do any reconnaissance. Why? All those bare information is going to be given by the client to me directly. I don't. Whereas a hacker has to do that information, right? Reconnaissance and scanning in large attacks, right? And hackers would spend months together collecting information. It is hacking a large attack vectors are never something which occurs in 1 or 2 days time. It goes on for months, right? They would have, any big banking attacks would have taken, the planning would have started. They would have started scanning about 6 months in, right? And they have to wait. A lot of patience is required when you're doing that part. Okay. The scanning is where you directly connect with the server, right? Trying to, that your VA part, what we talk about, you directly connecting to that and finding any vulnerabilities that occurs. And once you find vulnerability, what you're going to do? You're going to gain access and you want to execute code on the server. You want to run, copy the data. All those things are going to happen in the gaining access pass, right? Okay, compromise, you gained access, you try to do all those things. Once you have gained access, right? So usually what will happen, there's some kind of a vulnerability. As I told, FTP vulnerability was there. I was able to collect information. But let's say a couple of days later, the administrator will update that particular vulnerable component. Then you're automatically logged out, right? You can't get into the system again. You need to wait for one more vulnerability to pop up for it to get inside again. And that is not a good idea. You don't know when that is going to happen. Will it happen also? So in order to do that, we have to do some kind of a maintaining access process. Basically, once you gain access, you'll all immediately put up some kind of a backdoor. Sometimes what they'll do is that they'll create one more user ID of them, right? With a root access and privilege. So it happened in real time. One of the companies in US, they got to know, they were not doing any log analytics. They were doing log analytics and they got to know that company was hacked, right? and they got to know they were hacked 4 years back, and that hacker has continued to come inside the company network whenever he wants and then take things out of data and go. And because they were worried, because they are not understanding why is their competitor getting all the data, they know about that, they're losing copyrights, they're losing the, other things, all those things is there. Someone, so when they audited and they got to know they got hacked, and that particular user, hacker had created a fake user out there with admin privilege. Right. So even though they had passed the vulnerability, since the user was already created with admin, he was able to come in and go anytime, gain access to that anytime of your choice and do that part. So that is maintaining access. And once you're doing that, you should clear all your tracks. Whenever any action in a computer system, there are going to be logs that are there. So when you delete some data or anything, or make some modifications, a hacker is going to look where that logs are there and is going to delete that information, right? But if you're the, if you're working on the good side, if you're a white hat hacker or security analyst, we are only gaining, we're focusing on two components out here. One is scanning and another is gaining access. Right? Maintaining access is not a part of the job. It can be done, but gaining access, if you're able to fix it, it is going to do that part, right? And at the same time, if you're looking at from an blue teaming exercise, you need to have a list of all users who are inside part of the company and check access, review their access rights once in couple of months time. So that is very, very crucial out here. So based on my experience, right? In my experience, I think last 7-8 months I've not been able to, I'm been in more in management role, less into pen testing. But till now I've hacked more than 350 plus applications, right? This include X-ray machines, this include vending machines, this include banking software, this include web applications, websites, you government websites and everything, right? And found thousands of vulnerabilities in them. So based on my experience, I personally think vulnerabilities occur in three different locations. One is vendor software, second is configuration file, third one is web application code, right? Vendor software is like your application, as I told, you may be running MySQL, PHP, Apache Web Server, or Ubuntu. What if there's a vulnerability in those software itself, right? In that situation, you can't do anything about that. That vendor software, because you don't have access to their code, right? So to overcome that kind of a vendor vulnerability, you have two options only. One is to update that vendor software to the latest secure version. Second one is to stop using it. Either there's only two things that you can do out there, right? Otherwise, it is not taken into safe out there. Second is configuration files. This is in your hands, but here the operations team is responsible for it, meaning server administrator, database administrator, firewall administrator. They have to look at that, what vulnerability configuration changes that they have done. And if there's vulnerable configurations, they have to make it changes to that part. Right. And this is also something which is not going to be that difficult also. If you know what you're looking, if your vulnerability scanning is good, configuration file, that is going to be a bit easier out there to be done. Right. The third one is the web application code. So whatever the predominantly right easier approach to hack a system nowadays is going through websites. Right, getting into the network of the company is going through websites out there. And this is because the developers have written a poor quality code. Right. So now predominantly penetration testing jobs, 90 to 95% of your job roles are going to be web application testing. Right. Only 5% you do infrastructure. And the reason is infrastructure scanners are really good nowadays. We just have to run scans once in a while and it will identify all the vulnerabilities. When it comes to web application code, especially checking authentication and authorization, doing it manually is very difficult. Sorry, doing via application scanners is very difficult. You need a manual intervention of them. And any modification or any vulnerabilities results in rewriting the code completely. Without rewriting the code, you cannot fix vulnerabilities yet. right? So these are the three different places we are looking at. Vendor software and configuration file is predominantly an operations team. Web application code is basically a developer's responsibility out there for this component out there. Okay, as this is what we just discussed out there, right? Vendor software only update latest version of secure software, stop using software, no security, and the vulnerabilities in configuration settings, right? So any questions in PT, penetration testing? Any questions, guys? Mila, nothing. You've given number of hours for that. That differs, changes from company to company, right? It is basically it's a service level agreement. It is not mandatory. The critical has to be 48 hours and high has to be 15 days or 30 days. Even an high can be made into 48 hours as well. It is service level agreement, depends on what is important out there and what constitutes a critical high or a medium vulnerability, right? So there is a CVSS scoring that we do. Based on that, it is going to change. So the numbers which I have given out there is basically it is for one of the banking applications which I've tested long time, but it is not mandatory, right? And certain companies they will get the report done and they will take their time to fix it, right? Especially when all these things comes into play when there's a client involved, meaning your testing application that has another client and there is a service level agreement out there or some kind of a compliance work is going on out there, right? So some kind of a compliance certification is required, so all those things it is going to be taken. How much times PT is done in a month or in a year? So it depends on the application, right? If it is a banking system, it is a mandatory requirement once in a quarter they have to get the application PT tested. Okay. A lot of applications will get their testing for once in a year because PT is bit more. It is, even though from my perspective, it is only 1 week's time, it takes more work from the development team as well because you never hack actual server. It is not a good idea. You can hack, but it is not a good idea. What they do is that they'll make an exact copy of that. Everything is going to be same. They're going to replicate the infrastructure and they give us to hack because when we hack, a lot of things could occur out there. There are times, many number of times, even doing a VAPT, VA can bring down the server. Right? Running a scan can bring down the server because server will be running with very less resource, less RAM and things and all. It can compromise. In those situations, it is a good thing to run. So even if they will have to inform us that you are actually testing on production environment because at that time we'll be very very careful. We'll drag out the attack. We'll do take more days. We'll take very sensitive. It is not a full blown attack where we're trying to compromise everything. Right. So just tell a simple story. We are doing a application server testing. So we want to check whether that application is vulnerable to DDoS attack and things and all. So we set it up and we were running some number of packets out there and the application was taking it. So jokingly someone told, add one more zero to that to the end of it. So we went from 20,000 packets to 200,000, 2 lakh, 200,000 packets in a small, short span of time. That is the packets that are sent to the server to process. And within 5 minutes, the server crashed, right? So then again, that particular activity was done over the weekend. That server was down completely. It took about another 2 days for the server to be up. And, that was from us perspective, we had an entire day action planned out how to compromise it, but we were able to do it in 30 minutes. So we went home, but for the next 10 days, a lot of things happened at the client's end. Wise, evenness, this attack was successful. Why was it not, why was it not able to withheld out there? Because this was supposed to be. This is a very big company that is there. And later they fixed the vulnerability, right? They got other appliances to help them protect about that part. And we reroute the, we reran the test of that. And with that time, second time it was fixed. So we had to spend an entire day on it. And it was not brought down. It was able to take the load very beautifully and things like that. And PT plays, but once you've done the PT part, right? When you try to hack into that part, and it is not compromised, then you know, okay, this is security is there, right? You will have a huge checklist of attacks that you can do on that. And when you do that attack and it is not compromised, you know, okay, this is bare minimum is there. Okay. Because security is never 100%. No one can give 100% security. Right? There's always be some vulnerability. It's only a matter of time who finds it. Yeah? Because a lot of times me and my team have gone up, they told this is application is tested, there's no vulnerabilities. We told okay, well, let's test it. And in one situation they told it's tested, we know vulnerabilities, you're wasting your time. We ended up giving them a 70-page report. A huge critical vulnerabilities were identified, right? They it ended up them changing their vendor immediately, security vendor, because the security vendor is telling it's secure when it is completely not secure. So those are the things that you take into consideration for that PT part, right? So any more questions from PT? See, PT is from an offensive security perspective, it is where your bread and butter comes into play, right? VA, a lot of people do it. Large organization will have one person, vulnerability analysis person. His job is only one thing. He'll come in the morning. He'll be given about 100, 150 applications. Because large banks, multinational banks, they'll have thousands of devices, thousands of servers, to be frank, all over the world. So we'll be taking about 100, 150 IP addresses, putting it into a scanner, run the scan, and he'll go out for coffee, have a break and things, because scan will take time. All right, you'll come in the afternoon back and the scan is complete. They'll take that report now and you'll put it in a readable format. Usually it is going to be in an Excel sheet, right? Because it is not going to be in a Word document and all, because it becomes difficult to manage when number of devices are more. The web applications are usually in a Word document or a PDF, whereas infrastructure are in Excel. It becomes easier for them to manage and issue fix those vulnerabilities. So evening you'll stay back and finish up the report, then come back next day. Next day you'll have the same thing. He'll be handed about 100, 150 IPs, and there's not much work from his end, right? The remediation and everything will be given by the scanner. Only thing is that he will tell which IP addresses are critical. He'll make a report for that and keep on going with that. But PT is not that part, where here you're actually actively interacting with the application. You're sending a payloads and checking how it's behaving, modifying your payloads and things and everything. Initially, probably it'll take 4 to 5 days to do it in the starting stages, but as you go further, more and more applications you test, it takes less, right? And PT is one of those centers where education qualification is of much less important. And even in US, we have seen absolute freshers getting 100, $120,000 per annum when they are really gifted. They're really good at pen testing. They have really worked on it, right? So I've hired quite a few people who have just cleared, they don't have any, they've gone to college, they have not cleared their college, and so official degree they've cleared is probably their 10th grade, nothing more than that. Sometimes 12th, grade is there, nothing more than that, right? But they are good, they're really good at it, and they know how to crack a website and things like that. Probably they will do the entire application in a single day, right? Completely compromise, understand what's happening, and they do get very good packages as well. The better you are, um, that's the thing. So any other questions, guys? Um, so this basically, see, end of the day, whether it is biometric or username and password, traditional approach, they are going to be converted into some kind of a numbers and binary only, zeros and ones. It has to be there. Some form, even your password is stored in a database, your biometrics is going to be stored in database as well, right? So it is a bit more difficult. Again, one more thing you have to understand, your biometric, your password has to match 100%, right? If you are an 8 character password, all 8 characters has to match. Whereas in biometric, that does not the case, right? Biometric says, because your face, let's say you take your fingerprint, you take your face, it is not the same every time, right? Your fingerprint changes based on how much you're pressing it on the scanner. Your face is going to change. You maybe have a small, you might have allergic reaction, your face is swollen, or some food you're having, you're tired, you're not washed your face, you're not putting the makeup, right? All those things. In certain situation when you're older, there is no fingerprint at all out there, right? It is not accurate biometrics all the time. But if you lose your username and password, you can change it. But if someone steals your biometric data, you can't change it, right? So that is also we have to take into consideration. Uh, People who work on biometric hacking, it is, if you have a right set of tools, it is not going to be difficult, right? That's not going to be difficult out there. Understand, if biometrics is good enough, why is that OTPs are taken into consideration when you're doing banking, right? Biometrics makes the, in a mobile phone we are using biometrics a lot. That makes security easy, right? You might don't want to put up a 6 character and 8 character pin for any kind of a security. At that time, using a fingerprint scanner to authenticate yourself makes more sense. It's easier to do it, but it is not that it's more, right? Any single form of authentication is never enough. You always have to have multiple types of authentication. That's why it's called MFA, multi-factor authentication. I'm using username and password, then I use biometric, then I use OTP or token, some form of process that has to be there. Single form can also be compromised. It is not that if you have all three, it's going to not possible to compromise. It is going to make it more difficult. As I told, security is not 100%. Only thing we can do is to make it difficult for hackers, make them take more time or make it more difficult that they will not. So meaning when it is really difficult security, very few people will be able to compromise it, right? That's how it is. So it's just like when you're going out, you're locking your cupboards, you're locking your room door, then you're locking your main door, then you're locking the gate and telling the neighbors that you're not going to be there for a week's time, please have a look into that, right? All those things. Why are you doing all those things? Since you have already locked your cupboard where your valuables are, why need to block? It's just that it will take more time for the hacker or the thief to get inside that. Right? So let's take a 2 minutes break. No, I'll come back. We'll stop for 2 minutes, then we'll continue. So let's come back to the final topic today, that is AI in cybersecurity, right? Artificial intelligence, automation. So, but we need to understand, before we could go understand AI, we need to understand what is the difference with automation and what is an artificial intelligence, right? Automation describes a wide range of technology that reduce human intervention in processes, mainly by predetermining decision criteria, sub-process related actions, as well as embodying this predetermination in machines. So if you ask me, right, what is the everyday most of any house you take, there is a certain automation tool that we are going to use every house, right? In some form of it, at least in the developed country or developing countries, you see in the metropolitan area, this particular tool is going to be used by almost every house out there doing some automation action. What is that? That is going to be your washing machine, right? We're not talking about from an mechanical perspective, right? So not from an IT perspective. Generally, what is going to be there, right? An artificial intelligence is the ability of a computer robot to perform tasks that are commonly associated with intellectual process characteristics of a human. So meaning it is telling some form of intelligence is there. That is the process. What constitutes an intelligence according to you, right? What do you mean by intelligence, right? Because when I talk about intelligence, right, we're talking about Einstein intelligence is also intelligence. At the same time, when we're talking about ape level intelligence is also intelligence, right? The parrot is also having an intelligence. That is also is right. So what is the level of intelligence that is important of that, right? When you're talking about AI, it does not mean that it is going to do a lot of your actions. It is able to do take it in thing and all those things are going to be there. That is not the case. So that's the reason why I'm talking about automation out here. Because what happens in an automation is that you're taking your human actions that you're going to do every day, repeated process, and giving that action to be performed by a machine, right? So in automation, what is going to happen is that a clear set of instructions has to be given in advance, and the machine is going to follow that exact set of instructions directly to the point. Meaning, whenever you put a clothes and put the washing powder into the washing machine, you're going to tell it what type of a wash you're going to do, right? You're going to tell it it's a white cloth, so it has to be white clothes. That you have to select in the program, right? You have to select how long the cycle is going to be there, what type of a cloth type you're working on, how much is going to be the rinse cycle or spin cycle. Each and every decision that machine is going to do is going to be pre-decided by the humans, and that is going to be actions is going to be performed by the human, the machine of that. So as I'm telling here, what makes an intelligence is someone's program's ability to make a decision, right? So if something is there, it is able to tell, look at some data, it is going to, whenever you put anything into AI, it is going to look at that information, collect a lot of information. There's a lot of decisions that are made based on the criteria, right? So that is what makes. So once it fine tunes that, then it shows a different process of that. Intelligence basically comes down to doing some kind of a calculations, but in an intelligent way, that is decision making, right? Even telling which algorithm to use, that is a decision making. In an AI-based intelligence, if you take here, if you're taking any washing machine is going to have an AI, what is supposed to happen? You just have to put the clothes in the washing machine. What detergent, how much detergent has to be used? Should we use a conditioner? What type of wash cycle supposed to be there? What duration? What is the spin cycle? All those decisions are made by the washing machine itself. You're not doing anything out there. That is what an artificial intelligence will take into consideration. Right? I'm oversimplifying it. What do you mean by artificial intelligence? Right? In a similar process, what happens? This is what is there, right? So, but there's a lot of limitations you will see in ethical hacking or hacking. AI is not reached to that level compared to other. So when you go and check out ChatGPT and all, it will clearly tell I cannot help you with hacking. It is illegal and things. There's also Kali GPT nowadays that will help you with that, but still there's a limitations. So what are that limitations? It is going to take some time to get into cybersecurity, especially in offensive security, red teaming, it will take more time. Okay. So main thing is how do you expand an attack surface, right? It will there are a lot of your vulnerability V8 tool, what we talk about, those are all nothing but your automation tools. It's just given there's a preset of actions that are need to be performed. I give IP address and they will do it. So expanding, if find any new vulnerabilities, how does it go further inside that? That is not possible. Advanced threat, it is not going to be possible, right? When it's going to complex attack patterns, that's going to not going to be done by offensive security is an issue. Diversity of assessment, meaning the different workforce is there, right? Some Linux servers are there, Windows are there, keeps on changing. And the environment is constantly changing as well, right? One of the main problems for me as a pen tester is keeping up with the technology. And every week I'm working on a different technology altogether. One week I'm working on PHP, second week I'm working on, Java, and third week I'm working on Python, and it keeps on changing. And the combination is almost impossible to keep track, right? That is one thing out there. Balancing automation and manual testing, right? Where to use automated tools, where to use manual testing. That understanding is that you get only when you based on your experience. Because when you run we need to understand what are the limitations of an automation tools are. So that is how it's going to. Then again, manual testing is there. Tool development and customization, right? How do you create new tool and how do you customize for that? Finally, communication and reporting. This is where I struggle a lot. I always tell people, once I almost quit my job in pen testing because I could not manage the documentation. It's really, for me, I can probably sit down and try to hack a system for 2 or 3 days continuously. I will not, but sitting down and writing a report is a big issue. That is that. And certain times you get a lot of data when you're doing pen testing. How do you analyze the data? How do you check for threat intelligence, right? These are the current challenges I'm facing as a security, offensive security engineer. What problems I face? How is that? Can AI be able to overcome that? So if AI is going to be used, it has to help me win this kind of action. So here there are different components of that. One is AI agent can use power of LLMs to plan tasks, trigger task execution, make decisions, interact meaningfully with the world. Unlike basic LLM application, AI agents use LLMs follow up cyclic approach to achieve end goal, continuously learning, adapting from its finding, adjusting its approach. This iterative self-adaptation makes agent effective at solving complex, right, and tasks. Guys, is my screen shared? Guys, my screen's sorry, it was not shared. Please note, let me know if screen is not shared. It is always going to be shared, right? Let's come back. So here, as we understand, AI agents play a very important role, right? But there's also an ethical responsibility out here. Let's say, I'll give an example. What happened was there's one of the engagements we were there and we ran scans and everything. We found a vulnerability. We reached out to the team telling that this vulnerability is identified. They told, no, no, we have fixed. I think it's a false positive. Can you fine tune it? So we did the PT out there and we told we got inside the system. Right? This got inside the system. I think we can use this vulnerability to get into other machines. They told, okay, I think probably we have missed that, it's not possible, but we would challenge you to get other systems as well, right? And we kept on doing that process and entirely compromised the entire network out there. And finally, but here the client was informed about each and every actions that is going to be done, and he was in the loop. And there's a constant decision made by us what to disclose, what to work, and what not to work out there. Right? It is not going to be you're making the decision what tools can be used and whether to go in a certain point of view or not. Okay. Can AI make the decision is what we have to consider out there. So because do we need to tell AI, meaning when AI goes into action, try to hack into our servers or applications, AI should be able to stop somewhere in the middle and ask permission for us to continue ahead or not. It should be able to tell this is what has happened out there. Can I work on that part? Right? So here the AI is going to do a lot of actions, right? So what it is going to do when I feed the AI an application domain name, for example, appexample.com, what it is going to do, it is going to do reconnaissance, it is going to run web scanning, scan for vulnerability, right? And it will give me a report. But at the same time, what it's going to do is that then look at that particular vulnerability report, there's a pre-existing information out there, right? So it uses Nessus out there. Based on the report that is generated, it is going to decide what other tools and how to increase the attack coverage. Now it is just a VA. Then I saw there is something called as a 443 port. Can I use another tool? One of the tools that can be used here is Nikto. So then it is going to do that Nikto. Then it will come up with the plan how to go about that. It's going to reason on that. But here, as I told, an agent need to approve that process. Can he execute or not? Right? Once that is approval is given, it is going to run the attack on the server. And once the attack is complete, the result is going to be analyzed by the AI agent. And it is not going to stop here. And this cycle is going to keep on repeating. As we told, we need an advanced attack. We need an increasing. We can get more and more information out there, right? Previously, a web server was attacked, but a database server was not disclosed. When we are completely compromising the web server, the data server may be showing as well. And then in the next instance, we'll compromise the database server, copy all the data. And in doing so, we can get information about another server that is there, which may be collecting information. We compromise that network and keeps on progressing it, right? This keeps on going on and on. And here, there is no human intervention, right? The AI agent is able to go through, analyze, and then plan accordingly and things like that, right? Especially this is going to be for a human being, right? It will take a lot of time to do this kind of a skill set. And amount of applications he'll have to scan is going to be very high for him to understand, right? But that is not going to be the case with the AI. It will be able to do a lot of these actions on its own. And every time it is getting better and better. Yes. So that is one thing we have to consider here is the ethics. So our what is there is need for a human to be available out here for checking the reasoning and thing for that. But it is going to be not far. This is a bit of a difficulty, right? Because AI is very, very, the consideration from an ethical point of view is very important. So, and it is pen testing, there's a requirement for manually to do it because there's a lot of difficulty in doing those actions out there. But it will take time, but we are going to see AI in pen testing as well, in vulnerability scanning as well, right? We have already seen significant amount in VA, but PT it will take a little bit more time, couple of more years to get it fine tuned out there. Right? So what does AI augmentation can help? Right? Identify potential entry point, reach target industry, security, general tasks that are there, reconnaissance. It collects information from everywhere, data summarizes. It will give a come with an adaptive testing plan and threat landscape is going to be identified for that. Right? In task that is there is system identification, technology fingerprinting, vulnerability scanning, and code scanning. Especially in code scanning, this is very, very important, right? It is understanding the code is very difficult. So what does AI augmentation will help out? Come up with a better raw output and traffic analysis, because traffic analysis from an infrastructure point is very difficult from a human being, right? That is there. So anomaly detection, you have to be very good human perspective for you to identify that. AI is going to help you better in that. Pattern recognition, script generation, meaning certain time having a custom scans is going to be important. So we have to write certain scripts for that scans, you know. So AI is going to help you with that scripts and everything. Right? Don't think AI is, it can do a lot of things, right? In some cases, the CI/CD pipelines, you can write the entire stages. Ask AI to write a stage for that. It'll write the entire pipeline code as well, infrastructure as a code. It's getting better every day, right? For that. So writing it tools is not going to be difficult for AI. So vulnerability analysis there is that, let's say when we are identifying a vulnerability, what is the impact, right? What is confidentiality is improved? Is there any, the one of the main issues in vulnerability scanning tools, right? And like Nessus and Quali is that it will tell something as a vulnerability even when it is not a vulnerability. It is called as false positive. AI tools will be help you reduce that, and it will also tell where what is the root cause for that, right? Is there any security practices that you have done? For instance, you may have about 100 vulnerabilities out there, right? So we will give out, they'll tell what is the issue. The issue may be that in that case is that organization does not have a, you know, package management setup out there, right? Which is, it will constantly check for any new packages and install the updated packages. That is not there, but that is, we need a lot of intelligence from a human perspective to do that part, right? So can AI do that? Especially, yes, you know, those are the things that AI will bring into that point. Exploitation, how do you gain access into that? You know, how do you prevent security already existing devices? How do you, you know, evade security controls? Privilege escalation, meaning if you're a normal user, how do you move to an privileged user like an administrator or anything? AI is going to help you with that part, right? It will help you. How do you change? What are the steps has to be taken care and other things? What are the different attack vectors, right? For, I'll just give an example. Exploits DB is a location where you'll find vulnerabilities. What are any amount of vulnerabilities that are there, that is going to be disclosed here, right? And you can see is that 46,399 entries are there, showing 1 of 15 it is showing. So these are the number of vulnerabilities that it is going to be there. Do you think it's going to be humanly possible for someone to go through all this vulnerability and analyze them, come up with an intelligence? And one type of vulnerability attack vector can be used in some other place as well, right? So that is going to be difficult for a human being to understand. But for an AI, you know, once you get it developed, it becomes much more easier out there for it to work on it. You know, that is very much important. Finally, it is going to help you with reporting, which is very much. And to be frank, we have already used AI for certain amount of reporting, especially in a report we have to, the proof of concept is going to be there, but in the report we have to tell about, discuss about the vulnerabilities, give a detailed description, what is the impact and what is the recommendations for that. For all those things we can use AI for that. It is already being extensively used for that particular process, right? As we go further, right, wherever, a lot of people think it's going to replace, it is not going to replace humans for sure, you know, because same thing was discussed about, you know, automation is going to come, it is going to take over the testing and things and all. Only thing, what happened was a certain job role was changed to some other job role. And when automation came into play, it means it reduced the cost of testing. It means more people were able to create websites and actually increase the job requirements. Number of headcounts was increased. Right. In a similar way, when you're talking about, if you go a couple of years back, even a small store would think about having an, you know, Instagram account and things and all. Now a lot of even the small stores want to do e-commerce, and AI is only helping that part, right? There are a lot of companies which have bring down the development cost significantly low because they're using AI to write code for that applications and things like that. So similarly, same thing is going to the cost of securing your applications. It's going to be very easy when AI becomes better and it can fix, right? In there are a lot of DARPA based uh, actions that are done. You know, DARPA is in US in defense, contract. They do deal with that. They are working on programs where AI can use identify vulnerabilities and change the code accordingly. If there's any code related vulnerability, it will rewrite the code itself to overcome that vulnerability on the fly. Right? It does not currently it will report. We have to take that, understand what's happening, and rewrite the code and deploy it. Everything can be done by the AI itself. That is where we are looking at when we go further. Right? And a complete takeover, it's going to take a long time. It does not going to happen quite soon. As we might have already seen, there's a limitations to AI as well. Right? The more and more we'll see how it will go. So, any questions, guys? Any questions? So, Debas, sir, I think that's it. There's
Hello.
any more questions? Yeah, we can answer it. Otherwise, we can stop. Yeah, wisdom. Please go ahead. We're not able to hear you, wisdom.
Hello.
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. I was saying that thank you very much for all you are doing in this class and for what you are exposing us to as a future cybersecurity professional. But my question is how to do with the AI you just mentioned, the capability and what is going to be doing in the future. So, what is now the duty of a future cybersecurity professional that like some of us that are like trying to learn something about cybersecurity now. So if AI has those kind of capability to assess vulnerability and write code to correct it, so what would not be our
Hmm.
duties as a cybersecurity professional?
Uh, so for instance, let's say that is going to be quite a far away. That is not something what we're looking at. So basically, right now, I'll tell you what is already on the way from an AI perspective. So usually it's something called as a code review that occurs, that is happening out there. There are certain, the manual code review is quite extensive. We have to be very good. You need to have years of experience to able to read at someone's code and identify stuffs in that coding out there, right? So now a lot of companies are using Olama AI and other AIs to find vulnerabilities at the code level itself. You know, it is not that when are you going to use AI, you already started using AI in cybersecurity, but at a blue team level, right? From an way today we spoke about red teaming, but at the blue teaming level, it is not. It's going to be there out there. You can. There are cases certain teams are working. You know, they want to see how do you set up a network, right? What is happening out there? How do you set up? What configuration has to be done? That can also be done out there, right? So basically, we have to understand how do you interact with that to AI and how do you integrate that process, that we have to see. It is too early stage in cybersecurity, but basically what is going to happen is that from an, let's say you're an engineer who is going to work on a blue teaming environment, let's say if we take from a DevOps perspective, let's say DevOps perspective, so you can use AI to identify vulnerabilities in your code, how they set up in your pipeline, whereas in pipeline connects with an AI, checks the code is run properly or not, linting is done properly or not. and find for any vulnerabilities are there, right? And not only that, so what is going to happen is that there's a configuration review that needs to happen. That can also be taken care by AI as we go further. So it will tell this server you're connecting to where you're running your production. It is log into that particular component and it will cross check, right? Okay, based on CIS benchmark, I scan this process, then it is able to identify and it will even recommend this is what you have to change out there, right? So all those things are happening out there. We are moving forward, we are working towards that. Companies are there, but that's how your job is selecting which AI is going to be there and what task is going to be assigned and how we are going to manage the output that is coming from it. Yeah? So that is how it will go.
Okay. So basically,
But
as we progress in our career, we need to also become skilled in AI as a
correct.
cybersecurity professional.
Yes. Yes. So basically, let's say, for instance, right now, a developer is able to tell an AI recently in one of the projects, you know, they told an AI to write a code for a particular action functionality. Probably it would have taken 4 to 5 days for someone to write that kind of a code. And AI was able to write it in a very short span of time, right? But the thing is, that guy who asked AI to write is a seasoned programmer or a developer. When he writes the code in AI, he's able to review that code, right? And then make modification to code according to the requirements of it. The point is that he needs to be a programmer, a good programmer first, for to take advantage of the AI. A similar situation, similar concept, a fresher was able to use the same thing, but the code quality was significantly bad out there. Why? This fresher was not able to prompt the AI to develop the code in a particular way because he lacks knowledge. And once an AI gives that code, he's not able to review that code and ask modifications to be done on that code, right? That is going to be difficult, right? So it is important for us, even when you're using AI in cybersecurity, you need to be aware of using what is the cybersecurity, what is that functionality and things. But where it is going to help you is that instead of me having a 10-member team, I can have a quality 3-member team and save that and work effectively using these three people, let's say, right? So we are able to significantly reduce manpower requirements when you are using development because literally we are able to take freshers in development with 1 or 2 years, not 1 or 2 years, 1 or 2 months of training, and they can start developing applications, right? We'll tell them what is that they have to look and things. And previously they used to take about 6 months or 7 months or 8 months of training before they could start, contributing in the team. Now that is not the case. Okay. And as it's going further, the code review is also happening AI. So it is going to help you with that part. Understand AI is not going to replace, it is going to enable you to do your actions better. So any other questions, guys? Try different AIs, whatever suggest. Try doing normal actions, whatever you're doing. Let's say you're in, how do you set up something like, um, let's say, 1 second.